Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy, you can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hey listeners, Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian, and your host of this podcast. Today, I'm here with Hillary Allen, an endurance athlete. Hillary's career as an endurance athlete has not been straightforward. Through injury, setbacks, and being told she would never run again, she's had to rethink what she considers impossible as she continued to push herself, believing in her best athletic days ahead. In 2017, Hillary had a life-threatening accident where she fell 150 feet off a ridgeline during a sky race in Norway. Hillary broke a total of 14 bones and was told that she would never run again, let alone compete at the elite level. The Cliff Note version of this story is that after several years of rehab and recovery, she made a full recovery and returned to elite level racing, running some of her longest and most challenging races post-accident. It's what led her to believe that your best athletic days are ahead of you. Hillary's book, Out and Back, shares more of the story and is an inspiration to anyone who knows what it means to reclaim and rebuild your life, one day and one step at a time. So we will focus a lot of our conversation in today's podcast about this huge part of Hillary's life. But Hillary is also a scientist. She has a master's degree in neuroscience and physiology and structural biology. She's a running coach and a gravel cyclist. Hillary has years of outstanding performances, really too many to rattle off. However, I guess recently, this past year in 2021, Hillary was second at Broken Arrow Sky Race Triple Crown, third at the 52-kilometer National Championship Broken Arrow Sky Race, and first at MIUT Madeira Island Ultra Trail 115-kilometer race. And if you are not familiar with skyrunning, I just want to say, YouTube some skyrunning races, or you can actually go right on. Hillary has her own website, hillaryallen.com, and she has a few videos on there that just kind of show some of the images. Sky racing is different than trail running, and it's so crazy. So anyways, with all that being said, Hillary, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with our audience and come on the show.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. I just think, there's so much that we can talk about just with running and performance and an athlete, but I think your story of what happened to you back in 2017 is really, what is something unique to you for sure. And I think that's really a great place to start off this conversation of just kind of explaining to our listeners who maybe don't know your story of what happened. And I know it was a race in Norway that you were doing amazing at, and it was a big race. And what happened that led to that moment that changed your life?
Yeah. So, it seems it's actually coming up on 5 years this summer. But I think, many of us have a moment in our lives that's defining, right? And for many people, maybe it's more positive than what happened to me. It's like starting a family, moving across the country, or starting a new job. But it's something where it changes you, right? And so this was that moment for me that really changed the trajectory of my, at the time, professional career, but also just my life in general. And so what happened that day, I specialize in this running called Skyrunning. It's very steep and technical racing. It's, you climb like, 11 or 12,000 feet in the course of like 31 miles. So it's very mountainous. It's something that I kind of had a knack with. And I just started doing a bunch of these races, not only in the US, but all over the world. And I started doing this back in 2015. And then, I had won a US Skyrunning series, and then I was on the world circuit. And so in 2017, I was actually winning the World Series of Skyrunning. Mm-hmm. And this race in Tromsø, Norway was kind of like the second to last race of my season. It was kind of a no pressure situation, but it was just, running. Literally, it was how I describe it as an accident. It was the things that I remember from it is just running one step, and the next moment I knew I was just upside down and everything was turning, and I realized I was falling. So it was different than just a normal fall, right? Like on the trails, you catch your toe, you fall kind of like not all the time, but you do fall, right? And it felt different than that. Like it wasn't just a like, oh, brace yourself, you're falling. This happened so quickly that I didn't even really like register what had actually triggered the fall. And so, like things are true when they say, like time slows down. And I kind of had the chance to like, it's so surreal, like almost talk to myself and say like, okay, everything is going to be fine. Just breathe, relax. Like, it'll all be over soon. Like I still in that moment, like I thought I was dying, and it wasn't until, like kind of the whole rescue operation started underway where I saw other people, like after I had kind of like continued to fall somewhere along the way, I was unconscious. And then the next thing I knew, I was kind of like in a helicopter and then in the hospital and then, being unable to move for weeks, months at a time. It's probably one of the more humbling things that I've ever had to deal with, especially as an athlete, because I was literally at, peak performance. And then you go from peak performance and, ability to run in the mountains for hours and hours, and then to not even being able to get out of bed. And I mean, I wrote a book about this whole experience. You mentioned in the intro, like the Cliff Notes version. And even the book that I wrote is still like Cliff Notes version, because, recovery and building yourself back up from setbacks or challenges is like, it's one of the more difficult things I've ever had to accomplish in life. And it's even happening, 5 years later. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think like what you were saying, even your book, which I'm so sorry, I have not read your book yet, but I was looking it up because it's actually been recommended to me many times from other
I'd be
people.
happy to send you it.
Oh, that would be amazing. Thank you.
It's called Out and Back, a runner's story of survival against all odds.
Yeah. And I think just going back to, as you were saying, like even that's the Cliff Notes, because there's so much like this is, so I think like, because every day when you're in that position, I'm only imagining, because this has obviously never happened to me, but like when you're in that position of waking up in the hospital and when you say you can't move, like, okay, that sounds really hard to deal with, but like that went on for months and the days were incredibly long. So when you talk about like this defining moment in your life too, like what were some of the ways in this recovery period that like, I'm sure there were dark days. What were some of the ways that you were able to keep a positive attitude and mindset in any sense and keep that hope and just rethink what your future might look like? Because you didn't know as you were going through it that you would return to running.
And, it looked unlikely too, because this is the first time I had broken anything. Like I had never broken a bone before. And the doctors I wasn't really used to the medical system. Like doctors, it can be kind of, I appreciate their directness, but it can also be a little bit discouraging, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was I just felt robbed of joy and this thing that literally, I kind of had shifted my whole mindset and career. Like before I started running, I was in graduate school and I was pursuing a PhD in neuroscience. And when I started running, I literally thought that this was something that I was called to do. Like it was something that it just made me feel so alive and so whole. And I decided to earn a master's degree, to stop my PhD and, give myself like a year to see if I could actually make it as a professional runner. And that was back in 2015. And so like I was actually making a name for myself and like doing really well. And so I felt just completely just empty. Like I felt like I was so confused. And to be honest, the first couple weeks, definitely the first couple months were very, very rough. And what helped me get through it was writing. I mean, this is kind of even a couple years later is when I actually wrote the book, but it just helped me to get out emotions on paper so they would just not be stuck inside my head. Because I can go some negative places, and I was going very negative places, and I didn't really have, I mean, I certainly had a great community, but it's very hard to tell someone that you love and someone that cares about you that like I had wished the accident killed me, because that was a very real feeling that I felt, because it was so hard to have my life just be completely changed. Like, you know, I'm so independent, and at this point I couldn't even go to the bathroom without supervision because I was a fall risk. Like I had both of my hands broken. My left ankle was badly sprained and that foot was broken, but I could like kind of bear weight on it. And my right ankle, I couldn't bear weight on it at all. My right foot had surgery on it, and I couldn't cook for myself. I couldn't drive. I couldn't, you know, I could hardly do anything. And everyone was around me was saying how lucky I was to be alive. And certainly I knew that and I felt that. But at the same time, I also felt this extreme sadness and this, that I didn't really have things to live for because my life was completely changed the way that I like to live it. And so I think, and this kind of goes for anyone struggling with hardship, it's like being really honest with those negative emotions as well as the positive ones. I think it helped me to move through it.
Yeah.
But early on, I couldn't ignore them. I had to write them down. And then as soon as I did that, like then hope started to develop. And I could also write down those positive things. And I developed these mantras like very early on, actually, which I don't know where they came from. I think even like 2 weeks after the accident, I kind of wrote down this thing like, believe that your best athletic days are ahead of you. And I wasn't even walking at this point. Like I had no idea if I could even run again, but I still had this belief in myself that I was going to try and that I was going to see if it was possible. And to be honest, even if I couldn't run again at the elite level, I still had this belief that I could still explore athletic possibility even without running.
Yeah. I was writing down kind of as like almost like bullet points, everything you just said, of like writing and allowing yourself to acknowledge the negative, although there was a lot to be grateful for. And we all can look around and have a lot to be grateful for. And we want to be positive. You also don't just want to like, this is a terrible saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. You don't just want to like put Band-Aid on a piece of poop. Like that doesn't help. Like you
totally,
you can't just like say the positive words. Like you also have to process the negative. So like writing and validating those negative experiences, then getting you to a place maybe of more hope. And maybe that wasn't a positive place, but hope is something to really hang on to. And then it was creating mantras and then finding a belief. You know, your beliefs are so powerful, and that you can believe in something even if that's not the current reality. You began to believe that your best running days were ahead of you, even though that reality was not what was happening at that time. And that just seems to really have changed the game for you mentally to hold on to that belief.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so funny. I like that analogy actually, because it's like, you can't like, you know, what do you think, you grow flowers and like, you know, if you want to have some good flowers, what do you order? Like manure, you know, it's like, it like comes with the territory, but yeah, but it took a long time because there's this huge sense of loss, and still sometimes there is, right? This like loss of or mourning of like your old self, and constantly wondering like, especially now, like how, like I have to train differently than I did before the accident. I have to train certainly differently than my competitors, right? If I want to stay healthy and all that stuff. But like, you know, so there still is that not doubt, but there still is that, you know, wondering and that sadness. But I still think there's room for that, and also acceptance. And then I think having both of those conflicting emotions is what allows me to kind of continue to try and pursue that belief. But that transition, like it took a really long time. I don't really think I kept writing down that mantra, every day, even when I had, no motivation, or I was like only doing like PT exercises on the floor, or, I was just so sad or tired that day. I still kept on coming back to this belief, and it was something like this hope that I kept on holding on to. But, actually, I think it took me the better part of 6 months, definitely a year, for me to actually start to like really believe it, or like see it kind of coming together. And then on the order of like years, even like last year, when I could see, I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah. And then, it only makes it stronger.
For sure. Yeah. I think you have to believe it first before you see it, not the other way around.
Yeah. And it was really hard to keep believing when I didn't necessarily see it, because I kept on, there was more injuries that I had, and obviously all related to the accident. But it's hard to keep on believing something, even if like, I don't know, that you don't necessarily see the evidence. Like it's hard to keep on betting on yourself when, when things keep on happening or life keeps on throwing the unexpected at you.
So we had on the podcast a few weeks ago, the founder of the Injured Athletes Club, and her slogan is sort of like, make recovery your sport. Did you find that throughout your recovery that you were motivated, like in that, this is my mission, this is my task, this is my sport now, to recover my body, and believing that athletics were still in your future is what motivated you to do everything you could for recovery? Did you find that to be true for yourself? Actually,
I really like that. I mean, I think just as like a very driven person, and I like to make to-do lists, I like to have tasks that I can, do. And it makes me feel accomplished for a day. It was very hard to go through a transition of like, basically, prioritizing my year around races or certain blocks. And then I couldn't really do that. So like little pieces of recovery were like little things that I could hold on to each day to give me some sort of purpose or motivation. So I think it did become my quote unquote sport. I mean, recovering actually, I think, takes more time, like doing your PT exercises and stuff, than maybe training itself. And it's not as fun. So to try in some way to make it like a mission, definitely helped me.
Hey fans, I hope you are enjoying this conversation so far, and we'll be back to it in just a moment. But first, I want to pause and let you know that this episode is brought to you by the Female Athlete System of Transformation, aka the Fast Track, to overcome disordered eating and use food as fuel to perform at your highest level. The Female Athlete System of Transformation is my unique program and proven systems to guide female athletes to understanding and implementing the proper nutrition for their sport, life, and health. Myself and my team of registered sports dietitians work one-on-one with clients to address their unique needs and counsel them through the nutritional and behavioral changes needed. Many female athletes who resonate with disordered eating, mental guilt around food and body, relative energy deficiency in sport or female athlete triad, amenorrhea, repeat injuries due to negligent nutrition, or frankly, just a lack of knowledge and understanding on their fueling needs, have seen incredible success in the Fast Track. After years of working as a sports RD, I've compiled the most effective ways for female athletes to learn nutrition, be supported, be challenged, and ultimately find their success with fueling as fast as possible. So don't wait another day. Get to your goals faster by joining the Female Athlete System of Transformation. Look in the show notes or head to the website to book a free call and learn more. Okay, now let's get you back to the conversation. Enjoy. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot going into your story as an elite athlete and just as a human being when it comes to nutrition. But I'd be interested to know about, like, was nutrition a focus of yours at all throughout this recovery process? Was it something that was on your radar or mattered to you? And if so, what were some of the things?
Yeah, absolutely it was. And I would say that it was hard too, because, when you're training, and then you're not doing anything. Like your appetite changes.
Mm-hmm.
But my body was going through so much that it's like its needs were like incredibly high.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to make sure that I was getting all like supporting my body so it could heal the best that it could. And so I was kind of focusing on more anti-inflammatory things. I really like to cook, so that was hard to do at the first 3 months when I couldn't use my arms.
Yeah.
But, I had the help of some pretty awesome local people here in Boulder. Kelly Newland from Real Athlete Diets. She'd bring me some meals, so I'd have them at least once a week. She would include in it like bone marrow broth, so to help with like healing of my like the ligaments and my bones. And yeah, just kind of like anti-inflammatory foods like with like turmeric, curcumin, like this kind of thing. I always eat a lot of vegetables, but just like whole foods, like things.
Yeah.
I've always been someone who eats from the earth. So if it looks like food, it's like usually something that I'm eating. And so just focusing on that. But I think a lot of times athletes, they kind of get into this thing. It's like, oh my gosh, if I'm not running, then I can't fuel or I can't eat. And, I've definitely been someone who I don't think that that's the way. And especially I think as well as training, fueling and sleep is probably the two most important things. So in addition to eating well, I was really trying to prioritize sleep. But that was really difficult because I had broken my back and I couldn't sleep on my stomach because of my broken arms. And so sleep is hard to come by. But
wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in there. But like even with other, like kind of injuries that came post accident, it's allowed me to kind of readdress things, because in something that I've learned too as a coach is that especially with females, like there's things that we need to pay attention to a little bit more so than our male counterparts. And one of the things is in like daily training is like protein, but then for me also, like it made me pay attention to like bone health, because I had broken my foot last year and I broke my ankle like 2 years prior. And, I'm a runner. So I'm just like, well, what is this? Like, I have lots of muscles. Like, I don't understand. Like, my bones aren't brittle. But like, if you run long distances, you really have to pay attention to kind of like the timing of nutrition and how it relates to like levels of cortisol in your body, which is basically like a stress hormone. And I'm really into this kind of stuff. So it helped me to kind of really re-examine it and to really prioritize like how I can actually support my health, but like through the things that I'm putting into my body. And so I can get the most out of it from a training perspective. And it's not as much as just like, okay, I need to train as much as I can and then like, eat as little as possible. It's like, how can I maximize both of those things and kind of get the best out of both worlds?
For sure. Yeah, I think in your recovery period, those anti-inflammatories and bone healing nutrients were super important, but then it highlighted to you the importance of bone health all the time. And I think that a lot of athletes, like when they do get a bone injury, then they pay attention to it. But I think the rest of us kind of take it for granted. We're kind of like, we're always focused on building muscle all the time, recovering muscles, but like bone is active tissue. And we don't think of that because we think it's just this like hard thing, but it's active tissue. You're losing bone and building bone every day. There's bone turnover, and certain sports with more pounding that you do on it, there's more inflammation, more damage on it. It takes a lot of good nutrients to take care of your bone health. And I think another thing that you were hitting on was like nutrient timing. And I talk on this podcast a lot about the importance of fueling enough and energy availability and things like that. But there's a difference between like, are you getting enough energy by the end of your day versus all throughout your day? And we have a lot of research now that I know you're well read up on about like within day energy deficiency. Even if you're not energy deficient by the end of the day, if within the day you are, that will increase cortisol, that will break down bone more, that will put stress on your hormones at an even higher level, that will slow recovery and everything. So I think that's kind of what you were hitting on, is that brought more attention to you about your nutrient timing and making sure that you were not getting deficient throughout the day.
Totally. And I think as for an endurance athlete, right, it's like something that if we're thinking about, even on a daily basis, like if you're kind of low on nutrients or kind of stressing your bones even on a daily basis, like think about that if you extrapolate it for like weeks at a time or months at a time. And then during a big race, right? Like that's where it can be almost like this leaky pipe analogy. Like if like it's like your water in your sink, it's still running, but like there's water, like you could be getting more out of it and there's still something wrong. Like it's just this constant like drip. And it's basically, that's what helped me pay more attention to bone health. Cause it's like, you don't want like these like bone injuries to come up like years down the road. So, and the simplest thing you can do to fix it now is timing of nutrition. And that starts like during the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that focus for you. And I think it also just highlights too in the recovery period, just to double tap on your sentiment of like, you might have been physically moving less, but your body still had a huge demand to recover. And that mindset of knowing like, I need a fuel to recover is so helpful for anybody else that's going through, a period of time where they're not training at the level they were before. There's still a high demand on the body.
Yeah. And even another example to kind of exemplify that is I actually lost my period for about like 6 months. And that has never happened to me throughout sport. And it was when I was healing from all of these injuries, because estrogen is also related to maintaining bone health, and it's also related to just like, energy levels. And so like one way that your cycle can be actually shifted is by like not fueling enough. And I was eating a lot during this time, but my body was still like needed more. Right. Mm-hmm. So it was incredible for me to witness like the small little shifts in my body, just like through that healing process.
And the stress and lack of sleep that you were hitting on too, right? You were so emotionally and psychologically stressed. And then sleep plays a huge role in your hormonal health as well. Never mind performance and just life. Sleep is like number one in every aspect of, if you were to rank like what affects your health, it's always sleep. So those two things were also, you were getting like, hit with the lack of sleep and the high psychological stress. And all of that comes in play with hormone health.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know. Sure. I always joke that I'm just such a grandma because I love to go to bed at 9 p.m. So it's like, if I get asked out like on a date or something, like, yeah, let's go meet up for drinks or something at 10. I was like, nope, sorry, I'm in bed already.
Yeah. I understand. I get it. So I'm a new mom. So any sleep I can get, I'm like, yeah.
Exactly.
So at what point, just for our listeners to kind of hear this, it's not the end of the story, but whatever. But like at what point were you like, I'm going to run again? Like you had this belief in yourself. You started, within your rehab, getting better, getting stronger. Like at what point were you like, not only I'm going to run again, but I'm going to pursue the same and better than it was doing before. I want to go back to these high level races and everything.
So the latter, that took a little bit of time, but I will say, so I was in my, my PT, with my PT in my gym, like every day, sometimes twice a day, because it's like something that provided a community for me, and that it helps me to get motivated to just like get up to at least see some people and see some sort of progress. But I think it was so I was like, I couldn't weight bear for 3 months. And so after that, I think it was probably around the 6-month mark where I finally was able to incorporate jumping into my routine. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I did it, like I was actually scared to do it because like it kind of like, I think psychologically, like my body kind of knew what had happened the last time I had jumped, right? Like running is just a series of jumps. And so like, that's why I was trying to do it. And so I remember doing this and like kind of like going over to the corner of the gym where no one could see me. And then like, but ironically, one of my friends had like captured this moment.
Oh, wow.
But like, I remember I was just like standing at the wall and like finally decided to like get up the courage to jump. I think I jumped maybe like 2 inches off the ground, like nothing.
Yeah.
But it was like after that I was just like, oh my gosh, like I think I can do this. Wow. Like, and it was just that little piece of hope that it just started to just grow into something bigger. And then, a couple months later, I actually was able to take my first like running steps, and it was nothing pretty. It was like a minute on, minute off kind of thing. And then I actually had to have another surgery to remove like some screws from my foot. And then after that, it was, I think, like actually pretty fast. I think it was around the year mark where I was able to run my first race. And
wow.
I actually ended up running a 50K and
just a 50K for your first race after a near-death experience. Yeah.
And it was a sky race too, because I wanted to kind of like do the thing and like prove to myself. And actually it was really tough because I was so scared to like put on a race number again, because I didn't know if I was going to be like elite. And I had to just like let go of it and just do it because like, and the whole reason why I started to run again was because I loved it. And then it was kind of one of the most liberating feelings because I just got to run for the joy of it. And I think I finished 6th place. And I just like, you know, I was like crying during the race. I like cried at the finish line. It was this very like cathartic feeling. Yeah. But I think it was there that after, and this is a crazy story too, because then like a week later, I was going to this race in Italy. Like I hadn't planned to race it, but it was one of my favorite places in the world. It's in Cortina and the Dolomites. And I was planning to like do kind of like a speaking series because North Face, my sponsor at the time, they were doing a big like thing around that race. And so I was there to give a talk. And then last minute, I decided to hop in the race. And I actually won that race. And I was only like 5 minutes from the course record time, which I had set like 2 years prior. So that I think is when I really started to believe that I can do this again and I can be as fast, and why not faster than I was before the accident.
Yeah.
So
wow, it's just crazy. And it's so motivating for other people. I think that sentiment of doing your first race back and doing it just for the love of running and for the joy of it and just for you and for your life is meaningful, and something I think a lot of people need to hear, that, you know, it's amazing and inspiring that you are back to elite running and that your best athletic days are ahead of you. But I also think it's such an important note of like getting back into it is just for you and what brings you joy. And that for other people who might have other like injuries or life-changing experiences, that kind of changes the trajectory of their life and what they thought was going to happen, to just know like, it's not about returning back to the person you were before, but what's going to bring you joy moving forward, you know, because I think we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
So much. Yeah. Like, I mean, that was one of the hardest things too, is that I finally had to let go. Yeah. And this is still taking years, right? It didn't happen just at that, you know, at that race. And even if you hear me saying like, oh, like, okay, I want to like, you know, be better than I was before. But like, there's still that comparison, right? But I had to let go of who I was before because I'm different now. There's no like, you know, now you being a new mom, like you're different, like your life is different. That's something that you can't change. And like, you know, that's a very positive thing. But of course, there's some very hard things that come with motherhood and all like it's scary and terrifying and like all these new things. And like, maybe your time isn't your own anymore, but like,
you know, hitting the nail on the head there.
Exactly. Like all of this stuff. And so then, but I felt like my body wasn't my own anymore. And that's really something hard to do. And so like, and I, the whole reason about me writing the book in general and like what came up actually with this idea was 2 years later, after I had, you know, started running again, started competing, getting my feet under me again, I broke my ankle. And
you mentioned something about like broke my foot, and I was like, wait a second. Yes. Another one. Oh.
And this was related to I broke my ankle on the same side that like I had the surgery on my right foot. And so all of these injuries that I've had have been a result of, you know, this accident. And so after breaking my ankle, it was like I was going to war again. It was almost like I was like putting on my armor and like getting ready to do like recovery again. It takes a lot of energy and like emotional focus, and it's draining emotionally. But I started to think about this idea of writing down my feelings and writing down the whole process, because I feel like a lot of athletes and maybe people in general, they don't focus on the negative parts. They don't focus on the hardships. And I wanted to be completely honest with everything that I was going through, and that to really tell people that experiencing the pain and all the setback is what allowed me to have like the success story, which
Right.
I think many people only focus on the success story. It's like and I was very fortunate that that was my story, but I would have still tried just as hard, even if I wasn't elite anymore, because running and being outside brings me that much joy. And yeah, I think it's applicable to anything and anyone who's going through some sort of hardship or big life change. It's that, you have to kind of take the bad, but kind of like the manure analogy, find a way to turn it into something good, because I think it will turn into that if you give it if you like give it enough time and water it enough.
Your story is so relatable to athletes going through injury, because so many athletes do go through injury. And then I'm thinking I've got like 6 of my clients like in my head right now that I'm just like, oh, they just need to hear this and read your book, because they're people who did not take care of their body and their nutrition appropriately. Well, they were either their mindset was off or they were just ignorant about it. And they've made huge life transforming changes to restore their health and change their diet and change their approach to nutrition. I'm so proud of them for that. However, their body is still suffering some of those negative consequences, whether it be like they've been feeling great for a year, but they still got another stress fracture, or their performance isn't where it used to be, and things like that. And those repeated like injuries and consequences because of something that happened in the past. But it's like, it's one of those things where you have to keep dealing and processing those negative emotions. But this path forward, we're not going back to the old person we were, but we're finding the new person, the better version of you moving forward. So I think this will really resonate with a lot of my clientele. And hopefully people listening to this podcast too.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like, nothing is, ever straightforward too. And there can be a lot of like blame or like shame and this kind of stuff too. It's like, oh, what did like for me when I got injured again, I was like, did I start back too soon? Like all of these things. But then I try to use like setbacks as an opportunity to learn something. And for me, I've always fallen back on like nutrition and sleep and then like mindset. Right. And that always helps me to kind of reach a new kind of different level inside.
For sure. For sure. So what is up for you next? I know obviously we're skyrunning. We're also gravel cycling.
Yeah. So that was something that I found through injury. And it was like, and at first I kind of hated it because I was like, oh, this is a consolation prize to running. I don't really like it that much, but I actually truly love cycling now. And I'm actually on the Pinarello gravel cycling team this year. And so that's been awesome. Yeah. So I get to do some I've done Unbound 200, formerly known as Dirty Kansas, but they changed the name. So I've done that 3 years now. So it's a 200-mile gravel bike race. So the ultra endurance things. So I incorporate that and the gravel racing and riding into my kind of just my weekly training. And I love it so much. And so for running, I've run some of the longest races. So now like from Skyrunning, I've kind of taken the extreme vertical gain, and then I've run some 145 kilometer races. This is about like 93 miles, or like last year I won this race called Madeira Island Ultra Trail. It's on you literally run across an island and it just has an insane amount of vert. Wow. So now I'm doing some longer races, and this year I'm actually preparing for Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc. It's a 100-mile race that runs around the Mont Blanc, starting in France this summer. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very, very well-known one. So even somebody like me who's not super like tied into the skyrunning community, I know of that race in Mont Blanc because that's a very well-known one. So wishing you the absolute best as you train up for that and compete at that. Yeah. Well, it's so great to hear your story and just talk about like the struggles, the mindset, the physical journey, and the nutritional journey that you've taken over the years. And I always like to end every podcast with some of the same questions that I ask all of my guests. So kicking it off with, if you could eat one food every single day for the rest of your life and never get sick of it, what would it be?
I think I do this like every day anyways. Like carrots from the garden.
Oh, yeah.
They're the best. So I just need a garden all year to have carrots.
I love that one. And garden fresh vegetables, they're significantly different.
They taste so much better. I mean, and then
Yeah.
I guess the second tier would be baby carrots, but like, no, there's nothing that's better than like a fresh carrot from the garden.
Absolutely. I love that. What is your favorite sport to participate in?
I mean, trail running, yeah.
I know. It seems obvious, but you never know. I don't know.
Yeah.
And how about as a spectator? Is it the same or is it different? What do you like to watch?
Tennis. I used to be a tennis player in college. It's pretty fun to watch.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about you. Okay. Awesome. And if there's another female athlete out there that you think is really inspirational, or what I like to call fierce, fit, and fueled, who would that be and why?
Serena Williams. She's like the greatest tennis player of all time, a mama, and she still kicks ass.
Seriously. I know.
And then a businesswoman also. Yeah, all of that. I think in the running world, Allison Felix. But yeah.
Yeah. Two
and there's many,
women.
there's many more, but like those are the first two that just come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just powerhouses. Like, and they've opened up so many opportunities for the rest of us, you know?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Hillary, for coming on to this podcast, sharing your story, your insight. We're super excited to keep cheering for you and rooting for you in skyrunning and gravel cycling. So awesome. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but you also co-host the Trail Society podcast, and we had Keely, who co-hosts that with you. And so we just want to give a shout out. It's nice to do kind of like podcasts, like just to give our listeners to know if they want to hear more from you. You know, you are, you studied neuroscience, you're into the science of things, the training, you're a coach. Like, I think you have so much more information to share with female athletes. And if they want to hear more from you, they can listen to you over on the Trail Society podcast as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, for that shout out. It's really fun. And I'm glad you got to interview Keely earlier too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Hillary.
Thanks so much.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode, and thanks for listening. But before I let you go, I have free resources that you can have access to right away, right now, so that you can start fueling your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. First, I have your Red S recovery race. If you've ever wondered if you might be struggling with Red S, curious to learn more, or know you have Red S and are looking to recover fast, then you can head to www.riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS and download the Red S recovery race. See how you place and figure out the next steps to recovery. Plus, while there, I have a few other great resources for you, including 3 nutrition secrets that every elite athlete swears by, and access to a private Facebook community, Female Athlete Nutrition. So again, to gain access to all of this, head to riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS. That's /REDS. And you can gain access and get the help you need fast. Too many girls and women and female athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. Become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and I'll see you next time.